Hi, and welcome back to the channel. I thought I'd do something a bit different to wrap up the end of the year. I obviously have a top 10 list of releases coming, which will probably break into smaller videos rather than throw them all together. But I thought I would go through some of my favourite labels and analyse their content this year and compare it to previous years and any trends that we can find. And I thought I'd start with Arrow Academy, because Arrow Academy put out this tweet maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, basically saying that they are coming to a crossroads in the label and they really don't know what to do with it. So as well as do the rundown of what their content was, I thought I would use this video as an opportunity to kind of talk about my own feelings on the subject and maybe where they should go. They say they'll put a survey out. I may as well make a video. It's a good topic if nothing else, and it's a label that I care a lot about. So 2020 for Arrow Academy was a bit of a strange year for them compared to 2019. If I look at 2019, I'm sorry, I'm going to use a couple of graphs and pie charts and stuff here. The number of overall titles went down, or releases went down. They went from 23 to 17 that were this year. But that masks a little bit, I think, what their output was. So in 2019, a lot of their titles were predominantly from America. So the American films that were broadly 40s and 50s, so that kind of film noirish kind of releases. They do have some from France, they have one from Japan, one from just outside Japan and Russia, but by and large 2019 for Arrow Academy was made up of that. Fast forward to 2020 and they have a much more broad mix of stuff that they put it together. They, like I say, that 17 titles, but only 4 were American. The predominant amount were from France that year, and a good slew of Japanese releases, and you also have the couple from outside that, whether that be the Kieslowski set, etc., that was released. And what you have is, I think, much more reflective of what Arrow Academy should be. It shouldn't be just centralised in one part. So even the spread of the films, I mean, the heaviest year or decade that they released from was the 80s. In fact, 10 of the 17 titles that they released last year were from the 80s and 90s. So it gives you some idea of the direction of travel that Arrow Academy could be in. But what do they mean by changing of the guard? Or what do they mean by they're going to have to change how they think about Arrow Academy? It's always been seen as a bit of a passion project by Arrow, but they still give it the same love and affection that they do the Arrow video line. So why are they having to change? Well, I think the market for a lot of the films that they would have put out previously is being impinged upon by other companies. When they come to do Eureka, you'll probably see that a lot of their titles fall into what would have been the 2019 slate of Academy. Eureka are impinging on what they release and doing a very good job. May add, they're sticking to what they normally do and then adding this kind of fit in. Coupled with that, you've got Criterion, I would say, that are kind of making bigger noises in securing up licenses for films that, again, Arrow Academy would classically have released. So that'll include things like European classic cinema and those aforementioned westerns and film noir that you had seen previously. So what are you left with? I mean, you're left with Curiosities then. And Curiosities is kind of covered by Second Run. So Second Run are releasing an awful lot of, well, they would have earlier concentrated on Czech New Wave, that kind of European cinema of the 60s, 70s. And now seem to be delving more into more recent curios. But the difference, I would say, for them is that they're very heavily art house. Second Run are releasing things that are very much in the realms of cinema that I don't think many other labels are going to release, and they definitely have built up their own nation. And I think here is the key, I think, for Arrow Academy. It's taken Second Run many years to do this, and in fact their output this year, towards the tail end of this year, has increased significantly. And I think that's due to the fact that they have found their niche and they've found people committed to their curation. So the stuff that they're putting out is both good and, you know, finding an audience. And so you can ask yourself, well, what is Arrow Academy left with? Well, Arrow Academy's got a couple of options that I think aren't covered very much by the UK market. Arrow Academy, obviously, and Arrow as a company are heavily invested in Japanese cinema. And you can broaden that out to East Asian cinema, because most of the other releases that you get from East Asia in the UK are handled by specialist companies, whether import or otherwise, or done by something like Third Window Films. And Third Window Films do great work there, but they don't put out a lot of releases over the course of the year. So there definitely is an opportunity there. Coupled with that, there is this period of European cinema, and Arrow Academy as a European label, I think, have an opportunity to champion European cinema in a way that other labels kind of aren't. I mean, famous for the box sets. We could have box sets. I mean, they have some of the titles already. Olivier Assayas, Francois Ozon. There are lots of filmmakers doing great work, current contemporary filmmakers, for which there's definitely a market for. I mean, the success of Kieslowski for the label would tell you that there definitely is a market for some of this. You can even expand it out to filmmakers from South America, etc., that haven't found releases here but make incredible films. I mean, Mexico is obviously a hotbed of directors, as evidenced by the transition to Hollywood. But Lucrecia Martel, I've talked about in previous movies as well, has a slew of films that are absolutely ripe for releasing. Now, why would they not have done this already? Well, I suspect that many of the sales figures for Arrow Academy back up the fact that these are very much niche titles. So when they've tried to step outside this by doing things like the Macbeth, the Poetic Trilogy that they did, I suspect it didn't sell as well as other titles. But I do think you have to set your audience up for what to expect. So if you're releasing nothing but film noirs and westerns of that era and sprinkling some other stuff in, then that's what people are going to expect. Masters Cinema is a good example of this, in that they've reinvented themselves. They still do silent movies, and in fact some of the silent movies this year have been some of the strongest movies that they've released. But I think they've definitely found this niche of the types of stuff that they are going to release in this Masters of Cinema line. And I think it's a good blueprint of how they reinvented themselves and how Arrow Academy could do the same, because there are very few companies that do films justice, do extras, do releases, do box sets, do special better than Arrow. And their Academy line, like I say, is quite important to me. I think the stuff that they have introduced me to, you think back to the Fassbender release, there is a filmmaker which they catalogued and did amazing releases for, and I suspect was incredibly successful. Now, not everybody will be the same magnitude of filmmaker as Fassbender, but you make your own releases by the treatment that you give them. Like I say, Assayas, Ozon, there are lots of filmmakers. They can even do it by actor or actress. Like Mubi is another company that do this in the stream platform. They've started doing physical releases, but between Montage and Mubi, they're concentrating on very modern word cinema releases. Even somebody like Anti-Worlds is doing the modern. There is this gap between 1980 and 2015 where there are a lot of releases in here that aren't being released. You only need to look at the Cannes Film Festival Awards to see how many of those nominees never receive any kind of acclaim or release in the UK, to see that there are a lot of movies out there that you could get. It will take a while to build this up. They might want to start by experimenting with some of the stuff, doing seasons on the Arrow Video channel, for instance, which they seem to be building their platform on as well. So they could do some experimentation there, a bit like maybe we're doing, do these seasons and then hit you with the release at the end of it. Like this, buy it, here you go. So that's Arrow Academy this year. Fingers crossed we get a strong set of releases next year, and that the label continues to go from strength to strength. If you have any thoughts on what I've said, or or what I think about this, certainly correct me and come back to me. I'd love to have a conversation about it, including if you want to make your own response video or otherwise. But thanks very much for watching, and I'll speak to you all again soon. Take care. All the best. Bye.